The Fragile Calm and the Distant Fury. Location, Joint South American Command Center, Underground Complex No. 7, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Time, 1 day after the KR-TAC withdrawal. The silence in the Buenos Aires bunker was deafening, broken only by the hum of the life support systems. There were no alarms, no attack reports. The projections showed an Earth orbit empty of KR-TAC ships. The immense fleet was gone. President Solis stood up, his gaze passing over the exhausted faces of his companions. They left. We did it. The Goliath worked. A faint applause broke the silence, mixed with sighs of relief. Li Na, on the screen from Beijing, allowed a rare smile, fleeting like a mirage, to cross her lips. A Pyrrhic victory, perhaps, but a victory. We expelled the destroyer. For now. Marshal Kuznetsov spoke with contained euphoria. They underestimated desperation. They never expected a primitive planet to strike at their very essence. But the relief was fragile. President Maxwell, though smiling, pointed at the screen. They're out. But they haven't gone forever. Their logic of extraction is relentless. We must assume this is only a pause, a readjustment. Exactly, confirmed Li Na, solemnity returning to her voice. We did not annihilate the fleet. We only scared them enough to withdraw and reassess. Their central harvester was destroyed, yes, but the rest of the fleet remains intact. We must prepare for their return, and this time they will come with even greater determination and possibly with weaponry we cannot even imagine. The orders were immediate. The few remaining resources of humanity were redirected to the reconstruction of key defenses, focusing on improving dark energy detection systems and fortifying underground bunkers. The scientists of the Goliath project, although elated, were put back to work. They needed to better understand the weapon they had created, replicate it if possible, and produce as many as they could for a new attack. The counter-frequency network, though decimated, had to be urgently repaired. Every nation, from the smoking ruins of its cities, began to mobilize its few survivors for the task of preparation. Peace was a temporary illusion, the war was on pause. Chapter 39, The Roar of the Empire. Capital Imperial KR-Toxis Prime. Location, High Council Hall of the KR-TAC Hegemony, Imperial Capital KR-Toxis Prime. Time, days after the withdrawal of the Vanguard fleet from Earth's orbit. The three-dimensional hologram of the Central Harvester, imploding played on repeat in the center of the immense KR-TAC High Council Hall. 6 figures and the Supreme Commander Valerius formed a circle. They were the elders of the hegemony, the supreme leaders of an empire that spanned thousands of star systems. Their silence was the true measure of their fury. Supreme Commander Valerius, speaking to the members of the KR-TAC Council. The Vanguard fleet of Emperor XYLAR has reported an unprecedented incident in Entity 347 Gamma. Elder Primus, his voice resonating with an authority that stirred the air in the room, interrupted. Incident, Valerius. The reports speak of the neutralization of a Central Harvester, class battleship, a vital unit for large-scale extraction. And the total retreat of a Vanguard fleet. By a Gamma-class entity. Explain yourself. Valerius projected the data of the parasitic resonance signature of Earth and the subsequent impact of the Goliath missile. The terrestrial entity developed a rudimentary but functional ability to manipulate dark energy resonance. They launched a projectile that, during an energetic transition moment of our ship, created a self-destructive dissonance in the core of the Central Harvester. It was not a conventional kinetic or thermal impact. It was a corruption of its own power source. Elder Secundus, known for his implacable logic, intervened. Corruption? Of our energy? By an inferior entity? This is an affront to the purity of the hegemony. How could a civilization in the early stages of spatial manipulation achieve such an imperfection? Emperor XYLAR, whose holographic image also joined the meeting, though in a subordinate position, interrupted. The terrestrial entity does not control dark energy as we do. They have learned to parasitize it, to use their own planetary interference to create a noise that resonates with our own energy emissions. The risk of large-scale contamination of the harvest of Entity 347 Gamma was too high to ignore. The retreat was a tactical decision to protect the primary resource. Silence, XY-LAR. Elder Primus radiated overwhelming authority. The hegemony has waited too long for a great harvest like this one. A Beta-Alpha class resource. And now a parasitic anomaly has cost us a vital unit and caused an unacceptable delay. Supreme Commander Valerius, Elder Primus said again. This interference is now a strategic threat. Not because of its direct power, but because of its ability to corrupt our vital assets and resources. It is a plague. The vanguard fleet of Emperor XY-LAR has proven inefficient in eradicating it with the required speed and purity. We order the activation of the Total Purification Protocol, declared Elder Primus, his voice resonating with unyielding resolve. This is not a simple resource purge. It is the elimination of a threat. Assign the Annihilation Fleet Gamma 7 to this task. They are to depart immediately toward Entity 347 Gamma. Their objective is no longer the harvest, but the total eradication of the interference and any potential source of contamination. Valerius nodded, his posture rigid. Understood, elders. The Annihilation Fleet Gamma 7 will mobilize immediately. Entity 347 Gamma will be purified down to its foundations. XY-LAR, upon hearing the order, felt a chill uncommon to KR-TAC physiology. The Annihilation Fleet Gamma 7. They were the planetary destroyers of the hegemony, used to sterilize entire worlds. Earth had not managed to stop them, it had merely sealed its own fate on a much larger scale. Chapter 40, The Predator's Paralysis. Location, Annihilation Battleship Command Bridge, Gamma 7 Annihilation Fleet. Time, days after the High Council's order. The imposing Gamma 7 Annihilation Fleet, a formation of colossal destroyers and atmospheric purification vessels, had materialized at a distance outside the solar system. Its mission was clear, but XY-LAR remained motionless. Beside him, Chief Scientist Zarkon processed data with unusual urgency. Emperor, Zarkon's voice cut the silence. The analyses of the terrestrial entity's parasitic resonance signature are disturbing. The simulation of the central harvester being corrupted repeats with 99.8% consistency. It was not a random event. XY-LAR processed the information. The biological entity not only emitted that contamination signature, but then launched a projectile that exploded with the exact note to trigger a fatal dissonance in the central harvester. An event only possible if they understand, even empirically, principles of dark energy resonance. XY-LAR projected the image of Earth, a small blue and green orb, now covered by vast scars. So what? A single unit. A lucky shot. We launched the orbital annihilation and vaporized the planetary core. There will be no more resonances from their part. Zarkon changed the projection to a heat map showing the few remaining counterfrequency nodes on Earth. That is the dilemma. If we activate the total purification weaponry, the energy saturation of the atmosphere and planetary crust will be immense. If the terrestrial entity possesses more of these dissonance projectiles and is capable of launching them amidst our purge, the chain reaction could be catastrophic for our own annihilation infrastructures. More of those weapons. Their production capacity for that technology should be nil after the second wave. Theoretically, yes, Zarkon admitted. But the persistence of this entity is anomalous. The missile was a one-time weapon. If they had, for example, 3 or 4 of those projectiles, and launched them in sequence while our battleships are exposed in purification formation, the risk of multiple key units suffering the same dissonance as the central harvester increases exponentially. They would not annihilate the fleet, but they would damage it so severely that recovery would be a massive resource drain for the hegemony, far exceeding the value of the planetary harvest. General Thrak intervened. Their adaptability is alarming. Every one of our attacks has been a lesson for them. XYLR observed the terrestrial orb, his relentless KR-TAC logic now in conflict. If we launch the purification, and they possess more of those weapons, they would fire upon us instantly. They definitely already know how to manufacture it and were able to do so in a few days. They took our invasion seriously and are definitely waiting for us to attack again. Our defenses are calibrated for mass destruction, not for internal corruption. They could make the harvest of this world, and perhaps even the next in Sector Beta, unviable. The loss of a central harvester is already a blemish. And if they don't have any more, Zarkon pointed out, we will have inefficiently delayed a necessary purge. Prolonged inefficiency is a blemish, the destruction of strategic assets is a catastrophe, Zarkon weighed, his mandibles tense. We must eliminate the threat with the least possible degradation of our own resources. The High Council's priority is total purification, but not self-destruction in the process. It is not a victory if our ships are crippled. We propose a confirmed threat probe protocol, suggested Zarkon. We would send a long-range penetration probe, disguised with a residual KR-TAC energy signature, towards the surface. The probe would not attack, it would simply observe. If it detects the activation of energy patterns related to the preparation of a new dissonance projectile, we would have confirmation of their replication capability. This would allow us to readjust our strategy. XYLR remained silent, his mind processing the probabilities. The risk of a damaged fleet by an inferior species was an even greater affront than the delay. I want the results of that probe. If we do not detect the preparation of those weapons, or if we detect that their capabilities are limited, the purification will be activated without reservations. We cannot allow a primitive entity to paralyze the will of the hegemony. The order was given. The Gamma-7 Annihilation Fleet would remain in a state of active standby. Earth had avoided immediate annihilation, not by brute force, but by a cunning display of a power that, to KR-TAC logic, was a threat too costly to ignore. The Predator had hesitated, but its patience was finite. Chapter 41, The Demand for Explanations. The Emperor's cold fury was ignited, but not against Earth. His KR-TAC logic sought the true culprit for his fleet's humiliation. If a primitive species like the terrestrial one had managed to halt the powerful Gamma-7 Annihilation Fleet, it was because someone else had intervened. The blemish was not Earth's, but that of whoever had altered it. From the command bridge of his mothership, Admiral Vale showed an image of Earth. The parasitic resonance signature, he said with a sharp tone, is not something the terrestrials developed on their own. It was implanted. Chief Scientist Zarkon confirmed. The data tracks the energy to an external source. It matches interference patterns we have seen before in other less developed systems. The Milky Way Council has been conspiring against us, I am sure of it. A world that does not know space travel cannot simply create something like that in such a short time, XYLR stated. They have been manipulating planets we consider ready for harvest. An unacceptable intrusion into our territories. The image of Earth disappeared, replaced by a star map showing the Council's region. We lost the central harvester. And we had to delay our purification. It is a direct affront. It demands a response. Lord Scientist Zarkon began to cite a protocol for punishment, but XYLR cut him off. This is not a minor intrusion. It is direct sabotage of a hegemony operation. We want explanations. We will not tolerate this humiliation without the responsible parties paying. The Gamma-7 Annihilation Fleet, instead of heading to Earth, changed its course. The warp engines hummed. They would not go to pulverize a planet, but to the heart of Council space. The Predator had been provoked, and its attention had been diverted to focus on a more bothersome enemy. Meanwhile, on Earth, there was no celebration. The apparent withdrawal of the KR-TAC fleet was not seen as a victory, but as a very brief respite. The planet's wounds were still open, but no one was thinking of reconstruction. In the subterranean shelters and secret military bases, the keyword was preparation. Terrestrial society, which had always been divided, was now united by the threat of extinction. There is no time to mourn the cities we lost, Solis said, via video conference, to the other rulers of each country. Their objective remains to destroy us. Our objective is to survive, and that means counterattacking. The information about the extraterrestrials, obtained from the Goliath missile and the remains of the Central Harvester, was analyzed day and night. They were copying and improving at full speed. They sought ways to make more, how to make them more powerful, and how to use them with different weapons. Improvised factories, protected and hidden in craters and caves, worked non-stop. Every resource, every person, every ounce of will, was focused on one thing, being ready for the inevitable return of the invaders. They had bought some time, but not the war. The predator had paused, but had not abandoned its hunt. And Earth was not thinking of repairing, but of fighting. Chapter 42, The Confrontation at the Diplomatic Nexus. The Gamma-7 Annihilation Fleet, a clenched fist of KR-TAC steel and restrained fury, burst into the space of the Milky Way Council as a symbolic gesture to incite terror. They were not seeking to purge worlds, but a confrontation. The fate of Earth was, for the moment, secondary to the monumental affront the hegemony had suffered. At the heart of the Council's operations, the diplomatic nexus, Emperor XYLR did not wait for an invitation. He personally went to the Nexus's main assembly hall accompanied by an Imperial Guard. Milky Way Council, XYLR roared, his gaze penetrating every representative. The KR-TAC hegemony demands an explanation. Why has Entity 347 Gamma, a world you offered us as a peace offering, demonstrated energetic dissonance capabilities that are anomalous to its level of development? This deceptive manipulation has led to the loss of an invaluable asset and delayed our purification. We demand to know why you have betrayed us. A murmur of terror ran through the hall. Most of the planetary representatives looked toward the central podium, some unaware of what had happened, where the young Solari diplomat, Lyra, or Zodek, given the shifting names in the text, maintained an apparent calm that was beginning to crack. Emperor XYLR, Lyra's voice was soft but strained. Regarding Entity 347 Gamma, it was presented as a world with unique geoenergetic resonance, suitable for your purposes. Total biological inertia was never guaranteed. Calculated lies. XYLR countered, his voice booming even louder in the hall. Our tracking analyses indicate a non-terrestrial energy signature, one that does not belong to a primitive species. A signature that you induced. Did you think we wouldn't discover your plan? An act of sabotage against the hegemony, hidden behind an offering. The tension was palpable, dense as deep space. Several minor delegates began to whisper, their alien faces reflecting panic and a growing distrust toward their own council. Ambassador Varek exchanged a worried look with Ambassador Kromlar. The KR-TAC hegemony was feared for its power, but also for its relentless logic of retribution. Zodek struggled to maintain his composure. Earth was an attempt at coexistence, General. A way for the Council to find common ground, offering you a valuable resource. Offering a contaminated and dangerous resource is an act of war, Emperor XYLR retorted with icy coldness. We have lost a central harvester. The hegemony's assets are not a game for your demonstrations. If the Council has attempted to create a counterforce to our expansion, they have made a fatal mistake. You made us fall into a trap. As the young diplomat from the Solari species slightly flinched, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the threat, he intervened. What do you propose? An all-out war over a failed experiment? The provocation has already occurred, XYLR replied. You have deceived us. You have handed us a trap. If the Council does not cooperate, if you do not reveal the full extent of this manipulation and take responsibility for the loss of our asset, then the KR-TAC hegemony will consider this an act of open intergalactic warfare. And the first targets of our retribution will be those who have jeopardized our operations, before we return to Entity 347 Gamma to finish what we started. The silence in the assembly hall was deafening. The KRTAC did not take it lightly when their efficiency was compromised and their power challenged. The Council's arrogance in manipulating Earth, seeking perhaps a balance of power or a covert countermeasure, had ignited a fuse. Chapter 43, The Council's Bitter Confession. The deathly silence in the Diplomatic Nexus Assembly Hall was broken by Councillor Zodek. Emperor, Zodek began, his voice now stripped of its usual firmness, laden with a resonance that was almost resignation. We definitely made a mistake. We underestimated that species. It was as surprising to us as it was to you. How could we have imagined they could have done what they did? The last time we visited them they were building pyramids, they barely knew the mathematical concept. Given their short lifespan, it would have been highly improbable for them to possess such technology, a technology that even we don't know how to manufacture. A murmur of astonishment, followed by a chaos of voices, erupted in the hall. Representatives from some of the worlds witnessing the situation rose from their seats, writhing in disbelief and fury. What is happening here? They gave away a planet and now we are finding out. XYLAR remained motionless. Explain yourselves. The hegemony's patience is not infinite. Lyra stood up, calling for silence. Earth. Entity 347 Gamma, was offered to the hegemony as a peace offering. That is true. Her voice cracked slightly. It was the only resource we considered intriguing enough to halt your advance. A desperate lure against your unstoppable power. The projection of the terrestrial orb, the scars still visible, reappeared beside XYLAR. Its geoenergetic resonance signature is unique, Lyra continued, her voice regaining a faint thread of professionalism, though tinged with defeat. It possesses a telluric and magnetic instability that, we hoped, would be a point of study in dark energy extraction for your scientists, diverting your attention from the annihilation of our worlds. Our ancestors had identified the planetary potential, due to its intrinsic energetic chaos and the peculiar interaction of life with that volatility. A planetary anomaly that resonates with the dark energy properties that you, KRTAC, utilize. XYLAR looked at the star map. And the resonance projectile that destroyed our central harvester. Was that also part of your offering? Or a final trap? Here, Lyra's composure wavered even more, revealing the Council's deep shame and surprise. No. Not directly. The Council visited Earth millennia ago. It was a primitive world then, populated by beings barely in the Stone Age. We considered it a planet of low interest, and we have not monitored it significantly for thousands of years. Its evolution was underestimated. We did not know they had developed the capacity to manipulate that resonance. Honestly, we lost that battle on Earth because the primitive entity we offered you turned out to be formidable. We were unaware of their technological advancement. The capacity to create that projectile is an intrinsic evolution of Entity 347 Gamma, a result of its chaotic yet resilient interaction with its own planet, not a recent manipulation by us. Lyra's words revealed the raw truth. The Council had made a desperate gamble and had failed. They had gravely underestimated Earth and, in doing so, had provoked the KRTAC's wrath without achieving their goal of permanently stopping them. The offering had turned into a trap, not by deliberate design of a counterforce, but by ignorance, desperation, and an arrogant lack of follow-up. XYLAR absorbed the information, with a mixture of anger, calculation, and an unusual, almost palpable surprise. Earth was not as insignificant as they thought. The hegemony had been deceived not by a master plan of resistance, but by the Council's desperation and lack of information. The planet's unstable matter inefficiency, combined with the Council's inefficiency, had created an unsuspected threat. So it was not an intentional act of war on your part, XYLAR summarized, his voice still dangerous, an added edge of contempt. It was calculated incompetence. You delivered a compromised asset to the KRTAC hegemony, and it cost us a vital asset. The consequences of this, negligence, will be yours, Council. The hegemony does not forget offenses. And now that we know the truth, Entity 347 Gamma remains our ultimate objective. Emperor XYLAR withdrew with his guards toward his fleet, heading back to a position near the solar system, but without crossing it, they had to continue analyzing the situation. The KR-TAC's anger had not dissipated, but their objective had tripled, the Council for its deception and incompetence, Earth for its unexpected resistance, and the reaffirmation of their own supremacy. The entire galaxy was on the brink of war, not just over conquest, but over a peace offering that went catastrophically wrong, revealing the weaknesses of all involved. "Are you saying the Council has hidden this from all of us?" said a planetary representative, tossing away an inhabited world without fully consulting us. "It was a decision made for the greater good of the Milky Way." Zodek retorted, his voice rising. The KR-TAC hegemony was advancing unopposed. "We do not possess their technology or their capability to manipulate dark energy on that scale. Every fleet we sent was disintegrated before we could even see our attackers. Surrender was annihilation, this, at least, was a chance." A chill ran through many of those present. The admission was brutal, the Council, the galaxy's protectors, were powerless against the KR-TAC. When the KR-TAC arrived, we only had one option: offer them something they valued more than simple conquest. Earth, with its unique unstable geoenergetic singularity, promised to be a vast resource for them. A resource we thought would keep them occupied, far from our central systems, Lyra explained. "We gave it up out of fear. Out of fear of the annihilation of our entire civilization. We thought it would be a quick end for the surface inhabitants, in exchange for the survival of billions more." Chapter 44, The Council's Rift. The representatives of the hundreds of Council worlds, previously united by the fear of the KR-TAC, now turned towards Delegate Lyra with a mixture of outrage and betrayal. The diplomatic nexus hall turned into a cauldron of accusations. "You gave away an inhabited world. A member of our own galaxy," shouted one planetary representative. "The very Council that swore to protect life now sacrifices it as bait. What about trust? We built peace on knowledge and transparency, and you hid this atrocity from us." Lyra retorted, "Silence. All of you know the truth. Did your fleet stop the KR-TAC? Answer me. Their technology, their capacity to manipulate dark energy, they disintegrated us. They pulverized worlds. Our shields collapsed, our ships vanished. We don't have the technology to see them, to fight them, or even to fully understand them." A Xantari walked to the front, their voice echoing with bitter authority. "Each of you was a witness. The projections showed annihilation. The KR-TAC hegemony does not seek territorial conquest like us, they seek the extraction of dark energy, the purification of unstable matter. They dismantle worlds down to their core. Earth, Entity 347 Gamma, with its geoenergetic anomaly, its chaotic core, and its unpredictable magnetic fluctuations, was the only resource that intrigued them. It was a natural laboratory for what they seek," Lyra continued, her voice firm in its desperation. "We thought that singularity would stop them, that it would make them hesitate in their method of blind annihilation and buy us time for negotiation. It was our only chance to prevent the extinction of all of you, of all of us. But it is part of the Milky Way," said a planetary representative. "Yes, it is part of the Milky Way," Lyra conceded. "But a planet whose population, at the time, had barely reached its moon. They did not, and do not, possess the technology to leave their own solar system. They did not represent an intergalactic military force, nor a strategic resource that the other dominant species in this hall depended upon." The harsh truth hung in the air. The Council had made a cold calculation: sacrifice a primitive, isolated species to save thousands of advanced civilizations. They had judged the life on Earth as insignificant on the galactic scale against the unstoppable KR-TAC hegemony. What they did not foresee was that this insignificant life would refuse to be annihilated. The rest of the leaders from some Milky Way worlds, although still angry about the deception, could not refute the logic of fear and technological impotence. The rift in the Council was palpable. They had survived the first clash with the KR-TAC, but now faced a crisis of internal legitimacy and the threat of a galactic war they themselves had catalyzed. Meanwhile, on Earth, the humans, oblivious to the Council's dramatic confession and the new direction of the KR-TAC's anger, continued their desperate race against time. The flashes of the KR-TAC retreat were not interpreted as salvation, but as a brief and inexplicable respite. Their scientists and military worked tirelessly, with the only certainty that the enemy would return. The planet, scarred but not defeated, thought of only one thing: preparation. Because they knew their destiny, in the end, depended only on them. Chapter 45, The Shadows of Conspiracy. The echo of Lyra's confession still vibrated in the vast corridors of the diplomatic nexus, but indignation had already transformed into something colder and more dangerous: strategy. In private rooms, away from the eyes of the lesser representatives and the Council's listening systems, the true galactic powers began to weave new webs. For the young Solari diplomat, everything was always an opportunity. In a darkened chamber, he addressed two planetary representatives from the most influential and powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Among them were the astute Naelf and the implacable Lockster, whose stillness revealed a calculating intellect. The Council has demonstrated its incompetence and its cowardice, Solari pronounced. They gave away an inhabited world, one from the Milky Way, as a sacrifice. And, what is worse, they failed. Their desperation has dragged us into war. I tried to find another solution, but they voted and made a decision. They will have to take responsibility for it. The KR-TAC hegemony will not limit itself to the systems of the traitors, Naelf warned, projecting a star map showing the invaders' historical routes of advance. Their logic is simple: purge inefficiency. If the Council is inefficient, if it cannot protect us, then its territories will be the first to fall. And then, it will be us. They are no longer a veil protecting us, they are a cracked shield. They lost all authority the moment they sacrificed one of our own, Solari affirmed. They promised protection in the Milky Way and offered a world as bait. What prevents us from believing they won't do the same to us when the KR-TAC press them enough? The atmosphere was charged with palpable distrust. The Council, which for millennia had been the pillar of galactic stability, now tottered on the abyss of its own decision. We cannot wait for the KR-TAC to tear down the diplomatic nexus and then come for us, Naelf continued, his gaze sweeping over the expectant faces. We must act. Demonstrate to the hegemony that not everyone in this galaxy is inefficient. Lockster signaled his interest. And what is your proposal, Solari? An open rebellion? That would only hasten our doom. Not a rebellion, Solari replied. A solution. If the Council is the problem, if its ineptitude is what draws the KR-TAC's wrath, then we must eliminate the problem. What would happen if the hegemony found a new interlocutor in the Milky Way? One willing to demonstrate that the galaxy can be cooperative. Naelf understood the subtext immediately. We would hand them over. The Council leaders? As a new peace offering? Solari nodded. A necessary sacrifice. A test of good faith for the hegemony. We would demonstrate that we understand their logic of purifying inefficiency. We would eliminate the source of the betrayal and present a new order, one that will not hinder their advance, but could even facilitate their objectives, in exchange for our own survival. There was a tense silence as the full implication of his words sank in. It was not just the abdication of the Council, it was the handover of their own leaders to the very invaders who threatened them. And then, Solari continued, once the KR-TAC see our initiative, we would form a new council. A more practical one. One that does not sacrifice its own worlds for failed diplomacy, but protects the interests of its members through adaptation and strength. Naelf gave a sign of approval. It is risky. But if the Council falls, chaos will devour us before the KR-TAC arrive. This is a way to control the narrative. To avoid being purified by extension. This is risky, Lockster warned. Conspiring against the Council is punishable by death. We were condemned to death from the beginning, Solari countered. We must sound out other delegates. Secure the necessary support. The KR-TAC are not fools, they will detect any internal weakness. Our strength must be unanimous in this restructuring. The meeting concluded, leaving a seed of betrayal sown in the heart of the Milky Way. The Council had condemned Earth out of fear, and now its own members, out of the same fear, considered condemning the Council. While Earth prepared for a war it believed was imminent, the true titans of the galaxy prepared to devour one another, hoping to appease an even greater predator. Chapter 46, The Dilemma of the New Order. The conspiracy for the new Council, brewing in the shadows of the diplomatic nexus, faced an inescapable truth: to have any credibility before the KR-TAC hegemony, and to survive the impending purge, they could not simply eliminate the old Council. They needed power. A power that would make the KR-TAC, known for their cold efficiency, hesitate before acting. Lockster, Naelth, and Solari met again, the tension in the room almost as dense as the dark energy their enemies manipulated. The handover of the current Council might temporarily appease the KR-TAC, Lockster began, his voice resonating with dispassionate coldness. But if we don't demonstrate a real capacity for resistance, we will only have delayed our own annihilation. The hegemony seeks to purge inefficiency. If we are equally useless in battle, we will be next. Naelth nodded. Exactly. We need a deterrent. Something the KR-TAC will think twice about attacking. Something that, unlike our current technology, can penetrate their cloaking or withstand their dark energy. The three thought of the only thing that had achieved that effect, the terrestrial dissonance projectile. Entity 347 Gamma, Solari said, the name of Earth now sounding with a new respect, almost greed. They created the weapon that paralyzed a central harvester. A weapon that forced HFY to retreat and the hegemony to reconsider its strategy. That is the kind of power we need. But the idea was met with a new and dangerous dilemma. Alliances with the terrestrials is an immense risk, Naelth warned. Emperor HFY is already furious about their existence and how the Council handled them. If we ally ourselves with that anomalous species, if we give them support, we could infuriate them even more, making us the primary target of their retribution. But what other option do we have? Lockster asked, the question resonating with the grim reality of their situation. Our fleets are useless. Our shields, ineffective. If we don't obtain that technology, if we can't replicate it or at least understand it, after the KR-TAC purged the Council, we will be next. And after us, the rest of the galaxy. Earth is the only known source of an effective countermeasure. Solari leaned forward. It's a risk, yes. But it is the only risk that offers us a chance for real survival. If we don't ally with the terrestrials, if we don't obtain that weapon or the knowledge to create it, there will be no new Council to govern. There will only be galactic ashes. We must act fast. Emperor HFY is paralyzed outside the solar system. He doesn't want to get too close for fear of more terrestrial resonance missiles, but they also cannot return to their world empty-handed. We have to seize the current situation, or we won't get another chance. The hegemony thinks we are incompetent, Solari reflected. If we show them that we are capable of adapting, of learning from the anomalies and obtaining a power they themselves respect, perhaps that will change their calculation. But the price, Lockster insisted. They are a primitive species. How do we control that technology? And how do we prevent the KR-TAC from annihilating us for collaborating with something they consider an impurity? The question hung in the air, without an immediate answer. They had no other choice. The need for a weapon that would make the KR-TAC hesitate was paramount, and that weapon was in the hands of the species the Council had sacrificed. The conspiracy for the new Council, born of fear and betrayal, was now forced to consider a desperate alliance with the very beings the universe had condemned, in a final gamble for the survival of the Milky Way. The fate of the galaxy, ironically, might depend on the resilience of Entity 347 Gamma. Chapter 47, The Secret Proposal. The decision was made. Lockster, Naelth, and Solari met with grim resolve. The survival of their civilizations, and perhaps the galaxy, depended on a desperate gamble, allying with the very species the Council had sacrificed. Earth is our only option, Solari declared, reflecting the gravity of the situation. The K-Artak hegemony will stop at nothing that does not represent a credible threat. And the terrestrial projectile is the only weapon that has demonstrated that capability. The risk of further enraging the K-Artak is immense, Naelth acknowledged with anxiety. If they detect our collaboration with a species they consider anomalous, their retribution will be relentless. But the alternative is guaranteed annihilation, Solari countered with his cold logic. If the Council falls, and we have no deterrent power, we will be next. And Earth, after us. We need that technology. We have no other choice. The key question was how to contact them. The conspirators knew that the terrestrials did not know the universal galactic language. However, there was a crucial clue, the message the K-Artak had intercepted and decoded before their first attack on Earth. This fact had been recorded in the Council's systems. Let's recall the report from the Great Emperor XYLAR, Solari said, projecting a fragment of the K-Artak communication log. He mentioned that Entity 347 Gamma sent them a mathematical pattern, primitive yet unequivocal. A not welcome message. Lockster nodded. That means the terrestrials, though primitive in space travel, possess a form of communication based on universal mathematical fundamentals that any advanced intelligence can decode. It is the very language of physical laws. Then we will communicate as they did with the K-Artak, Lockster proposed. With mathematics. A sequence of pulses that demonstrates we understood their previous message and that we come in peace, or at least, with an offer of mutual survival. And we will ask them for an exchange of artificial intelligence systems for more fluid and accurate communication, so that our system and theirs exchange information to generate a translator between their language and the standard galactic language. The idea was audacious, an echo of the desperate terrestrial defiance. If the terrestrials had used mathematics to say, go away, they would use it to say, we need help. A small reconnaissance vessel was selected, cloaked with the most advanced technology, designed to pass unnoticed even by the most sophisticated K-Artak sensors. It would carry no offensive weaponry, only communication and analysis equipment. The ship will approach Earth, Lockster explained. It will transmit a sequence of mathematical pulses. A progression that demonstrates our understanding of their previous message and seeks to establish a peaceful dialogue. Not an invasion. The message would be complex, yet fundamentally simple, a new series of equations proposing cooperation, technology exchange, and an alliance against a common enemy. It would be a message of need, of respect for their capacity for resistance, and above all, of desperation. The ship departed in secret, a tiny needle in the vast galactic haystack, heading towards Earth. Its mission, to convince a species that had been betrayed by the galaxy that the only way to survive was to join it. The fate of the Milky Way, and the possibility of a new council, hung on the humans' ability to decode a message of hope, hidden in the same language they had used to shout their challenge into the void. Chapter 48, The Dilemma of Trust. The small ship, an almost imperceptible shadow against the blue of the terrestrial atmosphere, held its position. From within, a complex message was broadcast, a confirmation that they had decoded the previous human message, followed by an elaborate proposal for dialogue and cooperation. The centerpiece was an offer to exchange linguistic data and a formal request, permission for their artificial intelligence to study terrestrial communication patterns for a short period, in order to establish a fluid language bridge. In subterranean complex number 7 in Buenos Aires, the tension was palpable. Terrestrial scientists had decoded the message almost immediately. It was not a threat, nor a demand. It seemed like a proposal for an alliance. But caution was strongly enforced. Argentina's president, Ricardo Solis, received the message and called an emergency meeting with the leaders of the other countries, explaining the situation. They understand our mathematical language. They want us to open our channels to them. But who are they? And what guarantees do we have? A young cybersecurity analyst intervened. They are asking for an exchange of artificial intelligences, ours with theirs, for linguistic analysis and fluid communication. We could be opening a back door. An attack vector. They could map our defenses, our infrastructure, everything. That is true, but we need fluid communication, Solis replied. Let's find a way to manage that exchange without the risk you're mentioning. Do what you have to do to make it secure. An alliance could be the key to long-term survival, but the fear of new aggression, or of being exploited, was an insurmountable wall. The wound from the surface bombardment was too fresh. Terrestrial scientists worked tirelessly. Hours were spent unraveling every equation, every sequence. Finally, the terrestrial AI achieved what it set out to do, translating the message into understandable concepts. The shock was total. They are telling us they witnessed that Milky Way authorities sacrificed us to appease a more powerful species as a peace offering, President Solis said, his voice laced with disbelief. Humanity was a pawn in a galactic game they didn't even know existed. The admission of the Council's impotence, their desperation, their betrayal, it was overwhelming. The message detailed how their enemies would first turn against the Council for their deception, but then, inevitably, return for Earth. They needed the terrestrial weapon, the dissonance projectile, as the only effective defense. President Maxwell felt a mixture of fury and an icy chill. They sacrificed us. And now they expect us to save them. The revelation that the universe was much larger and more hostile than they ever imagined, coupled with the immediate betrayal, was crushing. The air crackled with the weight of treachery and the overwhelming reality of their position. We cannot give them the weapon, General Vance firmly stated. We cannot trust them with the technology that keeps us alive. If we give them the blueprint, what prevents them from eliminating us afterward, or using it against other worlds? Solis nodded. But we cannot ignore them. We face extinction, and so do they. The threat of annihilation is real and shared. From the heated discussion emerged an audacious counterproposal, dictated by necessity, mistrust, and an incipient human pride. Our response must be clear, Solis said, looking at the other leaders through the screen. We appreciate the offer of dialogue. We recognize their communication capacity. But we cannot allow access to our weaponry. Not at this moment. Earth's security is our absolute priority. Everyone agreed. It was a categorical no, born of the purest mistrust. On the Council ship, Lockster, Naelth, and Solari heard the terrestrial message. Frustration and bitterness filled the bridge. They have rejected us, Lockster grumbled. They don't trust us. And, given the circumstances, how could they? Their distrust is understandable, Naelth admitted, though with resignation. They have been attacked. It is the logical reaction of a species fighting for its existence. They didn't know that, for the humans, that distrust was even deeper than they could imagine. Solari looked at the projection of Earth. Their resistance is admirable, but also reckless. They believe they can fight the KR-TAC hegemony alone. They don't understand the scale of what is coming, or that the true threat to the galaxy is much greater than their planet. We must insist, Solari said with a resolute voice. We have no other choice. We cannot return to the Nexus empty-handed. Find a new way. We must find a way to earn their trust before the KR-TAC return to finish what they started. The survival of the galaxy depends on it. The ship remained in Earth orbit, a point of light oscillating between hope and desperation. Earth, for its part, dug in, ready to face the universe alone, unaware that one of its last hopes for survival depended on trusting those who had once abandoned it. The dilemma of communication without trust became the new, most urgent battlefield. Send the following message, Solis ordered. We understand your desperation. We understand that the hegemony is a threat to the entire galaxy. Earth cannot and will not hand over the blueprints or formula for our weaponry. This technology is a product of our singularity and our desperation, and it is our only means of defense. We will not risk the security of our only vital weapon. We will not trust those who abandoned us. The faces of the terrestrial leaders reflected the bitter justice of those words. But the proposal did not end there. However, we understand the need for a galactic defense. If the galactic authorities wish for the galaxy to have a worthy ally, capable of defending against the others, they must prove their worth. The next part of the message was the true test, both for the Council and for Earth's own morality. Demonstrate your commitment to justice. We need certain specific resources, raw materials, and technological components for the mass production of our missiles. If you comply with this request unconditionally and demonstrate your sincerity, Earth could, with time and proof, become an ally in the defense of the galaxy. The capacity to produce more of these weapons will benefit everyone. But for this alliance to be possible, there is a moral price you must pay. We demand the handover of the traitors. Those members who gave away Earth and condemned over 1 billion of our people to annihilation deserve to be punished according to us. Hand over the responsible parties to our justice, or to the justice of a neutral court. Only then can we begin to consider trust. The message was sent. A cry of defiance and an impossible demand from the small Earth to the mighty Council. The alien ship, in orbit, began to process the unexpected and audacious response. The Milky Way, oblivious to the drama unfolding in its forgotten corner, prepared for a war that had begun with an act of cowardice, and which would now be redefined by an act of indomitable resistance and a demand for justice. The fate of the galaxy hinged on the conspirators' response to this unexpected and morally complex proposal. Chapter 49, The Desperate Calculation. In the conspirators' ship, which remained in Earth orbit, the audacious and complex human counterproposal resonated in the minds of Solari, Naelth, and Lockster. Earth's message had not only been a demand for resources, but a cry for justice and a condition that, at first glance, seemed impossible. They demand resources to manufacture their weapons, Lockster grumbled, as the projection of the terrestrial message floated before them. And, they demand the handover of the council members who condemned them. Solari, who had secretly recorded that vote that condemned Earth, projected the names and images of the 9 delegates who had voted affirmatively to surrender Earth. These are some of the most influential and best protected leaders in the Milky Way. Their imperial guards are legions. How are we supposed to hand them over? Naelth asked. The Solari, with his relentless logic, ignored the indignation. Earth has made it clear. They don't trust us. This is not a request, it is a test. They want to see if we are willing to sacrifice our own, just as they were sacrificed, to prove our sincerity. It is an act of faith. Or desperation, depending on how you look at it. Silence settled upon them, heavy with the weight of the decision. The conspiracy they had hatched to overthrow the council for its inefficiency now faced a condition imposed by a species that, ironically, had put them in a strategic checkmate. If we don't comply, the Solari said, the terrestrials will not give us access to their technology. And if we don't have that technology, the KR-TAC hegemony will annihilate us. First the council, then us, then everyone. Lockster replied. Handing over the council leaders to the terrestrials, is politically unthinkable. It would lead to anarchy. The systems of those leaders would rebel. But what if we hand them over to the KR-TAC? The suggestion chilled Naelth's blood. It was a macabre twist on the KR-TAC logic. The hegemony seeks to purify inefficiency, Solari continued, developing his twisted logic. If we, a new council, demonstrate to them that we are capable of purging corruption and inefficiency within our own ranks, and hand over the very individuals who deceived them with Earth, it could be a far more powerful sign of good faith than any treaty. Lockster processed the idea. That could appease them, yes. It would demonstrate our understanding of their justice. And it would position us as collaborators, not enemies. But the terrestrials demanded they be handed over to them, Naelth interrupted. If we hand them over to the KR-TAC, what will that tell the terrestrials about our sincerity? We could lose their trust forever, and with it, the only chance to obtain that weaponry. Solari looked at the projection of Earth. They don't have to know that. We will simply show them with images and video that justice has been served, and that will satisfy them. We must take the risk. The KRTAC threat is immediate and overwhelming. The terrestrial threat, although powerful in their system, is local. If the KRTAC destroy the entire galaxy, Earth's trust will be meaningless. First, we secure our survival with the hegemony. The conspiracy turned into a plan of double betrayal. They needed the terrestrial technology to defend against the KRTAC, but to appease the KRTAC and have a chance to form a new council, they had to sacrifice the old leaders to the very force that threatened them all. How do we hand them over? Lockster asked, focusing on the practical aspect. The Imperial Guards of Lyra, of the Xantari, they are implacable. There is only one way, the Solari replied, a simultaneous attack that kills them all before they have time to give any orders, and no one will turn against us, since the galaxy is on the verge of collapse because of these useless people. The KRTAC systems are not the only ones with cloaking and stealth assault capabilities, Solari said. We will need internal support from some council factions who are already unhappy with the current leadership. And the promise of a new order, with them in positions of power, will be a great incentive. I was there, the Solari continued. 3 didn't vote in favor. It wouldn't be difficult to convince them. After all, if they weren't to blame for anything that happened, then why would they be against serving justice? They will be concerned with their own survival. The conspiracy deepened. The delegates began secretly contacting key military and political leaders in their home systems, weaving a network of discontent. The plan would be a coordinated assault, a coup d'état executed with surgical precision, disguised as an act of purification for the KRTAC and as a restoration of justice for the others. The fate of the Council, and of the Milky Way, depended not only on Earth and the KRTAC, but on a risky political maneuver. The conspirators prepared to sacrifice their own leaders to the invaders, hoping that this act of pragmatic cruelty would buy enough time to obtain the terrestrial weapon and redefine power in the galaxy. Survival, at any cost. Chapter 50, A New Dawn Stained with Blood. The decision had been made. The conspirators would not only hand over the council members who voted in favor of the sacrifice, but they would do so in the most brutally efficient way possible. Lockster, Naelf, and Solari consolidated their networks, pulling invisible strings among the discontented factions and military commanders loyal to their respective worlds. The new council was about to be born, not from a vote, but from a bloody coup. The plan was audacious and ruthless. Utilizing sophisticated cloaking technology and intelligence networks infiltrated by Solari, forces loyal to the conspiracy would simultaneously assault the personal strongholds and capital ships of the 9 delegates who had voted for Earth's sacrifice. There would be no trial, only execution. The Council's purification of inefficiency would be internal, a dark mirror of the KRTAC's own doctrine. Location, Gamma 7 Annihilation Battleship Command Bridge. The Great Emperor XYLAR received the conspirators' communication. THRAC, at his side, watched the transmission. The images showed detailed blueprints of the internal purge. A faction of the Galactic Council proposes a new order, the synthetic voice of the KRTAC system stated. They offer the purification of inefficiency within their own ranks. They propose handing over the leaders who deceived the hegemony with Entity 347 Gamma. Emperor XYLAR observed the projections. His inscrutable face showed no surprise. They have understood the logic. Inefficiency must be purged. He turned to THRAC. General, what is your evaluation? A pragmatic adaptation, Emperor, THRAC replied. They demonstrate understanding of our principles. A council purged by itself might be more manageable. More useful to our objectives. So be it then, XYLAR responded, and sent his reply. The message to the council conspirators was concise and brutal, a simple validation of their plan: do it. The hegemony gives you the green light. Location, Galactic Council Diplomatic Nexus. The diplomatic nexus, once a symbol of peace, became a stage for terror and chaos. Coordinated, invisible attacks swept through the ships and personal citadels of the target delegates. There was no time for defense. The imperial guards of the traitorous leaders were neutralized with relentless efficiency, surprised by a betrayal from within. High Counselor Zodek, Supreme Delegate Lyra, the Xantari, and the other delegates who had condemned Earth, fell. Their deaths were quick, silent, executed by those who considered themselves the future rulers of the galaxy. The new council had seized power in a bloodbath, with the implicit blessing of the KRTAC. Location: low Earth orbit. Time: hours after the coup. From the new council ship, a new message was sent to Earth, more detailed and graphic than ever. The message was from NALTH.IN Subterranean Complex No. 7, the monitors vibrated. President Solis, along with the rest of the presidents gathered virtually, awaited the new message. They watched with a mixture of horror and astonishment as the images materialized on the holographic screens. They were not abstract concepts, but crisp video sequences. The first sequence showed High Counselor Zodek, the Xantari, and Supreme Delegate Lyra, along with others, debating heatedly in a council chamber. Their final discussion about Earth's fate was clearly audible, translated: life will be dissipated, the only resource, to guarantee the survival of the Milky Way. Then, the images changed abruptly. Stealth teams moved through the ship corridors. The muffled screams and energy flashes were a prelude to bloodshed. They watched the Xantari dematerialize, Lyra fall, her pulsing glow extinguishing. The bodies of the traitors were shown, unmistakably dead. These were not images of a ruined planet, but of a coup d'état executed with calculated brutality. Nailtha's final message, translated by the terrestrial AI, was projected over the scenes of massacre. We have met your demand. The traitors who gave away your world have been punished. Your crimes have been avenged. This is the new council. We have demonstrated our will and our strength. We now require the resources to build your weapons. The threat is imminent. Your only hope is to join US. An astonished silence fell over the joint South American Command Center. It wasn't just that vengeance had been fulfilled, but the manner in which it was done, with a coldness and efficiency that rivaled the KRTAC themselves. They had demanded justice, and they had been delivered a massacre. The humans had a galactic ally. But the nature of that alliance, and the morality of their new partners, was as terrifying as the threat looming over them. The galaxy had changed forever, and Earth was now at the center of a power game it was only beginning to comprehend. Chapter 51, The Bitter Pact. The tension was almost unbearable in Subterranean Complex No. 7 in Buenos Aires. I don't like this, Solis said, looking at the screen showing the message from the new council, and the images of the eliminated galactic leaders. I don't trust them one bit. They killed their own with the same coldness as the others who pulverize worlds. Nobody trusts them, responded the President of Spain, Francisco Sanson, from Madrid. But we cannot manufacture enough dissonance projectiles with what we have. Global production capacity is a fraction of what we need to defend ourselves, much less to think of a counterattack. General Vance, usually a man of action, seemed more thoughtful than ever. It's a transaction. They want our weapons, or at least our capacity to produce them. We need their resources. It is an alliance of necessity, not friendship. And it's the only thing we can do, Solis said firmly, though tinged with resignation. Their message is proof of their desperation, not just ours. They need our technology, the only one that has worked. But we will make it clear that the formula remains ours. The final decision was unanimous, though every vote felt like a forced surrender. Humanity, with the bitter taste of betrayal in its mouth, would extend a pragmatic hand. The terrestrial response was concise, devoid of emotion, a reflection of the cold logic that now dominated their existence. Radio waves carried the message back to the new council ship in orbit. We have received your proof. We acknowledge the elimination of those responsible for the galactic betrayal. This act is recognized. Regarding your request for access to our technology, Earth cannot and will not hand over the blueprints, formulas, or direct access to the engineering of our projectiles. The manufacture of these missiles is the result of our planet's singularity and our own desperate innovation. However, the enemy's threat is a shared danger to the entire galaxy. If you wish Earth to become a capable ally in this struggle, you must fulfill your part of the agreement. We request the immediate delivery of the resources previously detailed, specific minerals, stabilized transuranic elements, and energy processing modules. Once these resources are delivered and verified, Earth will increase production for mutual defense. This will be a transaction, not an act of full trust or an unconditional alliance. The formula for our weapon remains on Earth, under the exclusive control of humanity. Cooperation will be based on the delivery of resources in exchange for missiles. The message was finalized and sent, a declaration of sovereignty in the midst of a proposed alliance. On the Council ship, Lockster, Naelth, and Solari read the response. Frustration was evident among the conspirators. "They won't give us the formula," Naelth grumbled. "They demand resources without giving us control of the production." "But they will give us the weapons," Lockster countered. "They control the production, yes, but their enemy is our enemy. And our galaxy needs that weapon. They have proven to be stubborn." Solari observed Earth, now not just a planet, but a fortress. "It is a sign of their distrust. And their strength. They want to be a worthy ally, not a subordinate. The Kr'tak hegemony seeks to subdue. The terrestrials seek partners, even at their own price. This is a basis for a new order. Naelth, I need you to talk to Kalen about the delivery of the resources to the terrestrials. We must be at the diplomatic nexus, otherwise, we could arouse suspicion with HFY. Kalen helped us with the simultaneous attack on the former council leaders, but he doesn't know that we are allied with the terrestrials. You will have to explain this to him, and only the most trustworthy people should accompany him in this process. If this information is leaked, we are dead. Let him know that after the delivery of raw materials in exchange for weaponry, we will give him the reward he deserves, the highest military power in the galaxy, answering only to the new council. The new council had gambled heavily to obtain the only weapon capable of harming the Kr'tak, and now Earth had raised the stakes. The relationship began, not with handshakes, but with a cold accounting of resources and a deep, yet necessary, distrust. The fate of the Milky Way depended on whether both sides could overcome their deep wounds and fears to face an enemy that knew no such doubts. Chapter 52, The Emperor's Final Decision. On the bridge of the dreadnought Star Devourer, the silence was denser than the darkness of space itself. The mighty Gamma 7 fleet had halted, not due to an expected tactical order, but because of the raw, undeniable logic of the terrestrial threat. Emperor HFY and General T'Rak reviewed the calculations again and again. The risk of catastrophic loss in a frontal assault against an enemy capable of replicating their dissonance anomaly was, at this point, strategically unacceptable. The Galactic Council's initial information simply hadn't accounted for this level of terrestrial readiness. Entity 347 Gamma has drastically accelerated its counterweapon manufacturing capacity, T'Rak murmured, his monotone voice barely breaking the stillness. The data suggests that the scale of their active dissonance has increased to a point where a direct confrontation would now result in an unacceptable casualty rate for the hegemony, with no total guarantee of purification. Frankly, I do not believe we can win. Grand Emperor HFY remained motionless. The initial humiliation had been an unpleasant surprise. This, a forced retreat imposed by a species they considered primitive, was a direct affront to the hegemony's infallibility. The Star Devourer, the spearhead of their power, was immobilized. The word fear would never be uttered on the bridge, but their inaction was its tactical equivalent. The Emperor broke the long silence, his voice vibrating with a restrained frustration he rarely displayed. Entity 347 Gamma has demonstrated a capability that the Supreme Being Valerius, in his infinite wisdom, appears to have severely underestimated. Our retreat, necessary as it is, reflects a strategic flaw at a level we cannot ignore. We were not sent for purification. We were sent into a trap. A humiliation. The chief scientist nodded in the gloom. The data is unequivocal. The casualty rates would be unacceptable. Valerius has asked us to sacrifice our army for an objective that now appears untenable. To continue this path is to follow an order that leads to annihilation. Loyalty cannot survive extinction. Grand Emperor XY inquired, and yet, the hegemony's doctrine demands absolute obedience. The fleet, our people, they expect us to continue. How do we justify such a fundamental deviation from the mission? THRAC responded with cold certainty. By presenting the truth. We have shared the active dissonance calculations with the fleet commanders. They are not blind. They can see that continuing is suicide. A soldier's loyalty is based on honor, not blindness. If we show that the order leads to the dishonor of a meaningless death, the soldiers will follow us. The true threat of total purification is not from Earth. It is from Valerius. Grand Emperor XYLAR cautioned, there are other obstacles, however, and they are the ones I worry about most. The balance of power in the Supreme Council is delicate, tied to the loyalty of its pillars. We cannot move without considering the other two emperors, Caprax and Archon. They will turn against us. THRAC explained, Caprax is a traditionalist. His loyalty to Valerius is not simple obedience, it is blind faith. He sees every order from the Supreme Being as a test of his fortitude. If we confront him, he will consider us heretics, a stain to be purified. His fleet is the most numerous, and although less agile than ours, it is composed of fanatical warriors who would die for Valerius without hesitation. Archon, on the other hand, is more pragmatic. His loyalty is a double-edged sword. If he sees an opportunity for power, he might be persuaded, but only by an overwhelming display of force. He would consider us a threat to his own ambition, not Valerius. Grand Emperor XYLAR concluded, then, a direct confrontation with them is not feasible. We would face a three-front conflict, Caprax's fleet, Archon's, and Valerius's defenses. We would annihilate ourselves before we even saw the gates of his fortress. We cannot fight them, we must outmaneuver them. Precisely, THRAC replied. The distance to their fleets is a crucial factor. Caprax is currently a month's journey from our current position. Archon, for his part, is almost 3 weeks away. If our action is fast and decisive enough, we could neutralize Valerius's power before his armies can react. Once the Supreme Being falls, the other two emperors will be forced to listen. They will not rebel against a total power vacuum, they will submit to the new order, or they will be left leaderless. Grand Emperor XYLAR mused, there is an inherent risk in attacking Valerius's power base. His defenses are powerful, his security networks impenetrable. Could we do it alone? With our fleet already weakened by this forced inaction, is a direct incursion even possible? The probabilities are low, THRAC admitted. But there is one variable we have not factored into our equation. The new Galactic Council. They have a considerable military force, although they lack our absorption technology. They have shown themselves capable of coordination that the old council could only dream of. They could be a valuable asset, or a deadly danger. Grand Emperor XYLAR hesitated, an asset? You speak of an alliance with entities that are not part of the hegemony. It is a monumental risk, THRAC. But their military power would serve us. Do you believe they would support us in a conflict within our own faction? THRAC argued, they see a strength in us. The fact that we have stopped without even crossing the solar system has shown them that we are not an immediate danger. And the fact that we, too, are questioning Valerius might be the key to a negotiation. They could see us as an opportunity to gain influence over the galaxy. The proposal would be simple, they are either on one side or the other, there is no middle ground. If they turn against us, we use our absorption technology and destroy them, and if they are in favor, there would be no turning back to betray us, as they would be the enemies of Valerius. They would have no choice but to see this problem through. A coordinated attack could weaken Valerius's defenses and the Elder's power in a way they would never expect. Grand Emperor HFY finalized, ambition and betrayal shining in his eyes, interesting. A betrayal at the heart of our hegemony. Using outsiders to overthrow our leader. It is not the path of glory, but it might be the only path to victory. Continue with the calculations, THRAC. Map the distance of the Caprax and Archon fleets. And, in a strictly encrypted manner, begin to probe the New Galactic Council. We need to know where they stand. Location, diplomatic nexus of the New Galactic Council. Time, hours after the arrangement with Kalen. They have stopped at a very distant range from Earth, and they have been there for some time now. They don't want to get closer, but they also can't return to their world. Imagine disobeying the order of their superiors, the KRTAC. They won't move. Lockster, despite his relief, felt a pang of something bordering on panic. Earth had exposed a fundamental weakness in the KRTAC that the Council itself had never even imagined. But that victory came at a huge price. This is a demonstration of weakness for the hegemony, his voice flatter than ever. They, the invincible ones, aren't moving. But what's worse, Solari interrupted, is that this affects us. We have been selling the KRTAC as the invincible force, the only one we must surrender to or ally with. We overthrew the old council promising alignment with them. What will they say now? What will the KRTAC think of us? We still have a long way to go before we have the terrestrial weaponry. Kalen is currently busy procuring the raw materials. We must be vigilant in case they cross the solar system. At some point, they will have to, and if that happens, and he coincidentally goes to Earth for the delivery, they could detect him. It's not easy to communicate and make movements without being seen, especially now that the KRTAC are close to the solar system. The new council conspiracy was built on the premise of KRTAC invincibility, using their power as leverage to impose themselves and then negotiate for survival. Earth's unexpected victory had undermined that premise. Now, the KRTAC might see the new council as ineffective, unable to control such a nearby anomaly. The message is clear, Earth can stop them, Nail said, his voice strained. But it is also a message that we could not control them. The credibility of our purification in the eyes of the KRTAC has been damaged. And the rest of the galaxy now sees Earth as the only real hope, not us. The terrestrials will be our allies, Solari replied, but we are the ones pulling the strings. Chapter 53, The Hegemony's Offer. Location, diplomatic nexus of the New Galactic Council. Lockster, Solari, and Nailth gathered around the holographic projection platform. The words floated in the air, Grand Emperor HFY requests an audience. Nailth felt a deep sense of unease. It's not a direct threat, but why? Why would they contact us this way? Lockster's expression reflected distrust. It's a trap. They've seen our lack of control over the terrestrial anomaly and now consider us a problem to be eradicated, but they want to do it discreetly to avoid further embarrassment. They'll use us to make an example. Solari interjected, it makes no sense. If they wanted to eliminate us, they would have more problems than they already have. Their fleet is stationed, but it still has immense offensive capability. This message is a deviation. One we didn't anticipate. I insist, he doesn't want to attack the terrestrials out of fear. Perhaps he's asking us to help him militarily in a campaign. If so, we will reject it, that is not an option. We are not going to make the old council's mistake of betraying one of our own. He leaned toward the projection. Let's accept the communication. Ignorance is our greatest enemy now. Lockster nodded, making a decision. Agreed. But let's maintain caution. If what Nail says is true, one wrong move could mean the end of the new council. Activate it. Space warped and filled with interference as a connection was established. Suddenly, the imposing figure of Grand Emperor HFY materialized in the center of the audience chamber, his presence a mass of shadow and power. Beside him, the forms of General Th. Admiral Vale, and the chief scientist remained motionless, observing the members of the new council with a gaze that was both analytical and contemptuous. Grand Emperor Xylar was the first to break the silence, his grave voice resonating with an authority that left no room for doubt. Entities of the self-proclaimed new council. We have halted our advance. The data from Entity 347 Gamma has proven that the mission is unviable and the information provided to us was incomplete, nearly flawed. There is a strategic error at the heart of this campaign. And that error is Valerius. He allowed the Elder Primus to influence him to attack again out of pride, without backup or reinforcements, without even waiting to analyze the situation. The audacity of the declaration was so immense that for a moment they didn't know how to react. Lockster recovered first. Emperor Xylar, the infallibility of your supreme being is the foundation of your hegemony. Your words are treason. It is not treason, it is survival, Th. intervened, his voice dispassionate and precise as a scalpel. Valerius has sent us to certain death. A direct confrontation with Entity 347 Gamma would result in the annihilation of the Gamma 7 fleet. Valerius has demonstrated an inability to foresee threats, and a careless willingness to sacrifice his own out of humiliation, but what's worse, it wasn't even his decision, he simply allowed Elder Primus to decide. His leadership has become a threat to us, the hegemony, and to you. Solari scoffed in disbelief. We are part of the problem. And you are calling us to join you? This is absurd. Xylar tilted his head, a gesture that seemed calculated. We are not joining you. We are proposing an alliance of convenience. Your fleet has military power, tactics that are effective. My soldiers trust your strength, but not your leadership. They are not blind, they see the truth that Valerius was mistaken. Our agreement is simple, you will help us eliminate Valerius and the rest of the elders who support him. In the process, the defenses of our planet will fall, allowing us to seize power. In exchange, you will be granted a position of power in the new galaxy that will emerge once we have triumphed. Solari, staring fixedly at the Emperor, asked, and what about Caprax and Aarchon? Their fleets are loyal to Valerius. Do you expect us to join a three-front conflict? They will not have time to react, Th. replied. Their military power is far from our world. If we act quickly and with coordination, we will strike before they can organize. Once the Supreme Being falls, the chains of command will break. Caprax and Aarchon will be left leaderless, and then they will have to decide whether they prefer to die or join the new order. Silence returned to the council bridge. The proposal was scandalous, risky, almost suicidal. But the alternative, annihilation at the hands of Valerius once he realized his mission had failed, was even worse. Xylar's offer gave them a third option, one unthinkable until a moment ago, taking control of their own destiny. Lockster looked at Solari and Naelf. We need to discuss this for a moment. Speak, but there is no more time. You are either on one side or the other, Xylar cut the communication. Lockster and Naelf looked at Solari. Lockster, what do we do? It's too risky. Solari, sooner or later, this was going to happen. I want to take advantage of this situation. If Caprax and Aarchon are far away, it's because Valerius doesn't consider the idea of Xylar going against him in the slightest. A coup d'état is not in the mentality of their hegemony. This means their defenses will not be sufficiently prepared if we attack quickly. By the time they realize that troops are heading to their capital, their defenses will be disorganized and panicked. I consider this an opportunity. Let's use all our military might and take advantage so they kill each other. I want to see the faces of Valerius and those elders when this happens. Solari requested communication with Emperor Xylar. Emperor Xylar, your proposal is unprecedented. We agree to consider your offer, but with conditions. We cannot risk the existence of our fleets in a hegemony betrayal without guarantees. Xylar agreed. Our troops are ready. Prepare your army to accompany us.